Big moves in the 154-pound division, where Terence Crawford has petitioned to be the mandatory for Tszyu's WBO belt, and the WBC champion at the same time. Now that both belts are on the line, let's talk about that and whether or not it's really going to happen in this video. All right, welcome back to the channel. It's your boy Fanon. Funny moves taking place yesterday as Terence Crawford, according to Ring Magazine, has petitioned the WBO, as if it wasn't obvious from the WBO's fickle actions yesterday, that Terence Crawford has petitioned the WBO to be the mandatory challenger for Tszyu's WBO 154-pound title. Also, because the WBO is stuck having to have a unification fight take place with the WBC, he will be the mandatory for two titles at 154 pounds. Now, funny business to me, because there's a lot of things going on that don't make sense. One of them is why Terence Crawford is doing it as a mandatory. The number two issue is why in the world the WBO would be acting like they didn't want to allow Tszyu to fight for the WBC belt, but backpedaled very, very quickly. Now, before I get into this, let me welcome you back to the channel. If you're new to the channel, please accept my invitation to hit the subscribe button, hit the bell icon so you can be notified of when we release more videos. And if you're a longtime subscriber and supporter of the channel, thank you so much for your continued support. Really makes a big, big difference to the channel. Thank you so much for everybody that supports, and the super thanks. Not a lot of people do it. It's one of the less utilized ways to support content creators. But for Matteo, Jay Miltz, Barbara D, and Jay Miller, and the people that do support that way, thank you guys very, very much. It really makes a big difference for the channel. But let's get into this. So yesterday it came out that Keith Thurman would be dropping out of the fight taking place with Tszyu, which was going to be competed at 154 pounds, where the WBO, very strangely, would not allow Keith Thurman to fight for their title, but allowed a non-title fight to take place. Funny move from the WBO. Then when the PBC wants to save the date, they switch Sebastian Fundora from the fight that he was having for the vacant WBC belt and was allowing Tszyu and Sebastian Fundora to fight for that title, right? Which would make it a unification fight. Very strange move. Paco Veracel, who was the president of the WBO, said that they were not going to recognize the WBC champion, who the WBC championship belt, and only would recognize the WBO champion in recess belt as the champion for the WBC. So therefore, there wasn't going to be a unification fight. As soon as I read that, I was like, I held up my hand. I was like, okay, what time is it? You'll be changing that decision real fast. You'll be switching up on that real fast as soon as you get hit with this lawsuit by somebody. And the reason that I thought that was because the WBA or the WBC cannot recognize Jermell Charlo as a champion for another sanctioning body, number one. But even if they decided to do that and override what who the WBC says is their champion, which is unprecedented, the WBO itself had stripped Jermell Charlo for inactivity. So they would be saying, well, we can strip Jermell Jermell Charlo for inactivity, but the WBC can't. The WBC can't put him in recess. And the title recess means you're out of school. That's what the word recess means. And it has been widely recognized that champions in recess are not the champions for the WBC. So it would be very, very funny that the WBO made up that rule all of the sudden and set a very dangerous precedent for the relationship between sanctioning bodies. Because if the WBO can just say, no, we're not going to recognize the WBC champion as the WBC champion, then why would the WBC have to recognize the WBA super champion? Or why would the WBC have to recognize the WBO champion at all? So if somebody is paying you fees and part of the fees that they're paying is to be able to unify belts and they're offered a unification belt and you deny it arbitrarily, you may be in some trouble. And yes, of course, there was a time, there's actually other examples where Mikey Garcia, who did not retire, was put as a champion emeritus. And the WBO allowed their champion, Vasily Lomachenko, to fight for a WBC emeritus title. So, yes, there's a slight distinction between the emeritus title and the WBC champion in recess. But they're champion emeritus, champion in recess, champion forever, champion out to lunch right now. What's the difference? So as I was 100% sure, the WBO almost immediately reversed that decision and said, yes, we can have that happen. We can make the unification, but you have to immediately enter into negotiations for a fight with the WBO mandatory. Who is the WBO mandatory? The WBO mandatory is Terence Crawford, who was the super champion at 147 pounds and can petition to become the mandatory for the WBO champion, who is Tszyu at the time, provided Tszyu gets past Sebastian Fundora, which is not a guarantee. Now, what's the funny thing about Terence Crawford moving up there? Terence said he was looking for big money. Terence said he was looking for big money. I don't understand how anybody thinks that Tszyu is a lot of money for Terence Crawford. Who's going to pay the money? How is that any bigger a fight than a fight with Jaron Ennis at 147 pounds? Inquiring minds want to know. However, any way you go, if he winds up having to get in a negotiation and Tszyu gives him an offer that he doesn't like, or Sebastian Fundora, who are both with the PBC, give him offers that they don't like, they have to go to purse bid. If they go to purse bid, who's going to pick up that part? Who's going to pick up that fight? And how much money is he going to make in that particular fight? So the way that is getting laid out, to me, makes it seem like it's not the highest likelihood that fight is going to transpire. Now, Tszyu himself said that he doesn't have a problem fighting. Terence Crawford, but wait till he negotiates with Terence Crawford and Terence Crawford wants all the money and he is a unified champion. Or Sebastian Fundora. I don't think Terence Crawford would fight Sebastian Fundora. Not because I don't think he can win, but that's a very, very, very awkward and very difficult fight for Terence Crawford, a 6'7", a 154 pounder, who definitely can get cracked, but at the same time, man, funny. It's just funny business all around, but we'll see what takes place. We'll see what takes place at 154. I would just rather, and at the very least, we know now that Terence Crawford can go ahead and drop those belts at 147. And until I see him actually drop those belts at 147, I'm thinking this is going to be some positioning on the part of on Terence Crawford to get more options out on the table for him. But anyway, that's my take on the matter. Please let me know what you think in the comment section. And with that, I'm out. Deuces.